Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I'm honored to be giving the drush today, in part to allow our dear rabbi, who had a little scrape this week, a little bit of a rest. I must say I'm not yet at the point in life where I have the merit to have prepared 4 different divrei Torah in a week for every parsha. However, this week was one of those weeks, and I'll just say in preamble, I thought about talking to you about Shoftim and the death penalty, but I decided that was not what I wanted to talk about. And I thought about talking to you about how a person is like the tree of the field, and how, as the rabbi mentioned, the gateways of our senses need to be carefully guarded. But I decided not to talk about that either. Also could have talked to you about uncertainty and ambivalence in Parshat Shoftim and how this relates to the grieving process. However, not going to talk about that either. However, all of these drashot I'm going to put on the shed, so if anyone wants to read them later. These are all for other gigs I had this week. It wasn't pure love of Torah. It was also love of Torah. However, what I do want to talk to you about, and this is in part inspired by the amazing service that we had here last night, welcoming home the new Sefer Torah that came from the Czech Republic. What I do want to talk to you about is how this parsha aligns with this point in the calendar, and another parsha we'll come to in a second, because this Shabbat, as I'm sure has already been mentioned, is the first Shabbat of the month of Elul, right? And the month of Elul is when we return ourselves back towards spirit, back towards our higher selves, towards the year that's coming, and also backwards towards the year that's passing as we review what's happened. And as we discussed in the first part of our class series that we're having in spiritual preparation for the Days of Awe on Thursday night, which we had a wonderful discussion. I hope you'll join us this coming Thursday night on Zoom for the next part. As we talked about, it can be very hard, daunting work to do that review, and also to admit to where we've made some errors of judgment, or maybe we actually haven't been as much solidly in the right in every interaction as we like to believe was the case, and the problem was all the other persons. As well as this being, generally a daunting and busy season as we're going back to school, back to work. Those of us, as I may have mentioned, who are Jewish professionals or deeply involved in synagogue life, can be a daunting season, as well as we're preparing for those big ones, those Days of Awe. I want to share with you a quotation from one of the greatest Jewish thinkers and teachers of the 20th century, Elie Wiesel, who says, "It is not given to man or to humanity to begin. That privilege is God's alone. But it is given to humanity to begin again. And each time we do so, we choose to defy death and side with the living." It seems to me that this Torah of beginning again is powerfully apt not just to the season of Elul, but also to this journey that we heard about a little yesterday of the old new Torah scroll, which has come to us. As Rob shared incredibly movingly last night, this journey began with Parshat Pinchas. As you might know, Parshat Pinchas is the parsha from the Torah that we read from the most often, because it has one of the festival calendars and with the offerings, and so we read from it every Rosh Chodesh, every new moon, and every holiday. And so that often, on a practical level, that's the portion of a Torah scroll that needs to be repaired soonest, because it gets the most use, it gets rolled most often. And so this journey towards the Czech Sefer Torah actually began with a sofer who had come to repair this passage from Pinchas, and then a conversation with that sofer led to the discovery that these Czech Torah scrolls were still being given to congregations who were worthy of them and showed the appropriate desire and all the other things necessary to receive one of these Sefer Torah. And as Rob shared, it was so moving what you shared last night, that this journey actually came to a full conclusion as you read from the new Torah scroll here in this sanctuary this week on Thursday, welcoming Rosh Chodesh Elul, and you read from Parshat Pinchas in that new Torah scroll. So it got me to thinking as well about one of the features. As I mentioned, one of the features of Parshat Pinchas is this festival calendar, but another of the famous features of Parshat Pinchas is it begins with the only word in the Torah, as you may know, and speaking of scribes, every single letter of the Torah has to be perfect, or the whole Torah scroll is invalidated until it can be fixed, except for one letter near the beginning of Parshat Pinchas, right? The Vav in the word shalom, peace or wholeness, has to be written, it has to be broken. The letter Vav is usually just a straight line, but in this word, in shalom, it has to be written like creating a break in the Vav, in the phrase. Lachen emor, thus I say to him, Hineni naten lo et briti shalom. Thus I say, God says, here I am giving to him, to Pinchas, my covenant of peace. And that's the word, the peace has that broken Vav in it. As Rabbi Jack mentioned last night, in an Ashkenazi Sefer Torah, it's traditional for every single column of the Sefer Torah to begin with the letter Vav. So this got me thinking even more about this Parshat Pinchas and the Vav, and the letter Vav as a prefix is the word and it seems to me, and Rabbi Jack said, it's because the whole of the Torah is and this, and this, and this. There's a continuity to it. And I want to share a few other ideas about this letter Vav, as well as being as a prefix meaning and. The word itself means a hook. It means a connector. It is, as the shape suggests, seen as being a channel between heaven and earth. It's of course also the third letter of the name Yud Hey Vav Hey. And numerically, it maps to the number 6. In Gematria, it's the number 6, which is seen as being representative of this material dimension, the 6 days of creation and the 6 directions, forward, back, left, right, up, down. And Kabbalistically, perhaps for both, combination of these two reasons, it being the third letter of the name and it being the 6, it is where the Sephira Tiferet resides in the Vav, and this letter Vav is seen as being not just Tiferet, but the 6 Sephirot immediately connected to it. So Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod are all connected to the Vav, which is seen as being the Guf Ha'ilan, the trunk of the tree. And the Kabbalists say, don't think that each Sephira is actually equal in size. Actually, Tiferet is like the trunk of it's like the main body of the tree, and all the others are like little branches coming off. The Vav is really like the central channel, the central column, the trunk of the tree of life. And as I learned this morning when I was studying a little bit more from the Sfatimet points out that along with the Yud, the Vav is the only letter which is made with one stroke of the pen. All of the others need some change of direction. So there's like a singularity, a simplicity, a directness to the Vav, which makes it all the more surprising that this is the Vav that needs to be broken. Like, what do we get from this Vav that needs to be broken? Well, one thing is you could say it actually introduces a Yud. The Vav now becomes a Yud and like a teeny Vav underneath. And we could say that the Yud, which is 10, which is the first letter of God's name, is that seed of life, that spark of life, of divine inspiration within everything, that in breaking the Vav, we make a little bit more space for God in the picture. When I leaned over to Rabbi Jack yesterday after he said the thing about the Vav beginning each column, and said, wow, how interesting with the broken Vav. He said, yeah, like wabi-sabi, which you might be familiar with, is a Japanese practice of taking a vessel which has been broken, a pottery vessel which has been broken, and mending it using molten gold as the mending fabric, and it makes this incredibly beautiful artifact, perhaps even more beautiful than the original unbroken vessel, right? So there's this idea that in the brokenness we actually create space for a fixing, for a healing that's more gorgeous, it's of a higher vibration than even what it was before. And it seems to me that shalom isn't the same as shlemut, which is an inherent wholeness, but rather it's the practice of making peace, where peace wasn't there before, where there hasn't been wholeness, where far from it, where there has actually been a profound brokenness. And I think this is what our work in Elul is all about, is coming to reconciliation and creating a peace where there hasn't been peace before. Similarly, too, with this incredible Sefer Torah, which literally endured the genocide of her people, there has come to be this greater wholeness, this new lease of life that adds to the beauty, that adds to the power of the story and everything about the use and the connection with the Torah through the presence of this artifact, which has been through so much and come to us in a new way. And dare I say it, also made me think of your accident, Rabbi Mark, both in the sense that, as we know, a bone that has healed after being broken is actually the strongest part of the bone, because the body has to give extra cells to that, literally extra cells to that part of the body, so that it gets stronger than it was before. But also, as you said last night, in having this, brush with mortality, chas v'shalom, but it really could have been terrible. It's not only made you feel so grateful to be alive and experience the beauty in everything, but also you've been able to really actually recognize how loved you are and receive the support and the care of this community and all of your friends and adopted family here. So really, in a way, the brokenness already is opening the way to a greater healing, and I hope that feeling comes deep into you and that you can hold on to it and really come back to it, because friends, it can be a little lonely being a rabbi. I don't know if you know this. You give a lot, and it can feel hard to feel appropriately recharged or received or met by others. So I really hope that this can continue to inspire and infuse you with a greater healing that's come directly from this brokenness. So I have a couple more things to share. The rabbi already mentioned that Shoftim and Shotrim, the judges, the guardians of our gateways, that this teaching has been applied to the gateways of our senses, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the mouth. I always thought this was a Hasidic teaching. I assumed this was like from the Baal Shem Tov or one of his students. Actually, as I found when I looked it up yesterday, it's from a book called the Siftei Kohen, and the author of that book died in the 1660s. So he died 100 years before the Baal Shem Tov was born. So it's actually even earlier than what we think of as the main renewal of Chassidut. But as we know, we see these gateways, these guardians as guardians of our gateways of our senses. And in the mystical view, we also see these shoftim and shotrim, these judges on the one hand and officers or guardians, it's not a word that gets used a lot, as being guardians of the right side and the left side, as it were, of the tree of life. The right side, the side of giving, the left side, the side of boundaries. I could say something else about you being left-handed and needing to do things with your right side. Come over to the right side more. But as the grandfather, one of the Apter Rebbe's, the Sfatamet, or his grandfather, I'm not quite sure which it was, says, this is about the iterative process. We need both the side that's turning us, the shotrim, and the guardians stop us from doing the wrong thing, but the judges are the right side, they keep us going more towards doing the right thing. And it's always an iterative process of going back and forth between Sur Merah, turning away from what's not helpful, V'aseh Tov, and also Aseh Tov, also doing what's right. And I really think that this whole Torah process, Rabbinic Judaism, is all about this and. That it's all about continuing to develop and to iterate the Torah that we need in our lifetimes. It's a foundational principle of Rabbinic Judaism that we have not just the written Torah, but we have the whole conversation and discussion that comes with it, the oral Torah, that keeps it fresh, that keeps it relevant, that keeps it being a tree of life. And that this process is all about trying to bring more wholeness into a world which is designed to allow for choice and innovation, and with that also inherently comes the potential for mistakes and brokenness, you know? So I think Shoftim is a great example of this rabbinic process, moving us from, what the Torah seems a pretty much unequivocal advocacy of something like, say, the death penalty, through to the rabbinic system, which makes execution pretty much anathema. As you probably are familiar, famous passage in the Talmud that says a court that would execute someone once in 7 years was called a bloodthirsty court, and then the rabbis chime in and say once in every 70 years it would be called if they executed someone once in every 70 years, that would be a bloodthirsty court. And then Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Azariah, I think, say if we had been on the Sanhedrin, that we would never have executed anybody, and that's pretty much the way that rabbinic Judaism has understood the death penalty, as something to pretty much be avoided in all cases. They make it extremely difficult to convict someone of a capital crime. There has to be an incredibly high level of proof that the person really did do it, and what's more, that they did it in full consciousness and awareness of what they were doing and of the consequences of their actions. You might also know there's a advocacy group, Jews Against the Death Penalty, and the name for this group is L'chaim. You might or might not know that we say L'chaim when we raise a glass, because it says in the Talmud that before execution a prisoner would be given basically a sedative in a glass of wine. So that's why, sorry, it's a little dark, but that's why we say L'chaim, to say this is not the drink of death, this is the drink of life. Interesting, right? So just to bring this all hopefully to synthesis and unity, let's come back to that vav, that broken vav, that whole vav. We might notice that vav is not just the central letter of the name Yud Heh Vav Heh, it's also the central letter of the name of this month, Elul, Aleph Lamed, Vav Lamed. And as Rabbi Jill Hammer writes in the Jewish Book of Days, which I've shared with you that wonderful book before, she writes this in one of the Elul, the 13th of Elul. She says, the Hebrew root for to be willing is Yud Aleph Lamed, a very similar combination of letters to Elul, Aleph Lamed, Vav Lamed. Elul is fundamentally about willingness. Willingness to work, to remember, to forgive, to act, to change. The older Upter Rebbe, the Svat's grandfather, adds to this. He points out that the name Elul can be connected to what's called a kriikative, where you have, it's written one way but you say it another way, or you understand it to be another way. From the Psalm 100, which is the one that begins, Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, serve God with joy, that we read on weekdays, it says, Da'u ki Hashem hu Elohim, hu asanu, know that God is God, who made us. And then it says, V'lo anachnu amo v'tzon merito. You may have noticed this before. It actually says, and we're not us. V'lo, lamed aleph. We're not us, and the sheep of his pasture. But the rabbis understand this to be, instead of lamed aleph, which means not, they understand it to be lamed vav, which means his. So it's not that we're not, it's that we're God's. So this is a rereading of what it actually says. And the Upter Rebbe says, if you put these together, the Aleph Lamed and the Vav Lamed, are we not ourselves or are we God's? Then you get again the name Elul, right? So like the Shoftim and the Shotrim, the Shoftim, judges, and the Shotrim, the officers, I think this is again pointing us towards this process of ongoing refinement. Two sides of the same, left leg, right leg, walking us ever forwards. The end of Rabbi Hammer's little keta on willingness says, in Talmudic language, a ma'aseh, a deed, can also mean a story. In Elul, not only do we act, but we construct a story about our actions. The Torah's story didn't end. even though many might have thought it had ended. Maybe it would have ended whenever it was taken from the synagogue where it was in the Czech Republic and hidden away. It might have ended in that warehouse with 1,500 other Sifrei Torah. It might have ended in the basement of the Westminster Shul, or it might have ended with one of the synagogues in the north of England that became too small and could no longer sustain it. But its story didn't end. That story continues. Our friend and teacher, Murray Yehudis, likes to say that she so believes in happy endings that she knows if it's not happy, it's not the ending. She's a woman of profound faith, as you know. So when we retell our stories in Elul, in this work of teshuvah, I think that's the main thing, is we have to be willing to change our place within them, right? To see ourselves less unequivocally as the heroes and the other characters as the wrongdoers. We have to break that vav of our own certainty. We have to make a bit more space for the yud, for that tiniest letter, that spark of divine awareness. We have to make a little bit more space for God, for that wabi-sabi of fixing something so it's more whole than it was to begin with. And that's, I think, where we can find ourselves in a covenant of peace.